Y'all, whenever we do Christmas, a series like this, we always think about, we call it stage design. Like, what are we going to do with the stage area? How can we kind of tell some of the story of Christmas through even the imagery and lights or whatever? And so this year, you probably noticed, we have a big star on the wall. The Christmas star. And some of you know about the Christmas star because it's actually in the Christmas story in Scriptures. Really, mostly in Matthew's gospel. You've got Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the New Testament that tells the story of Jesus' birth. And Matthew's gospel highlights, actually, the Christmas star. And we just thought that was a good image to use. Several of you have commented and said, man, I just like how the star, the simplicity of it, just gives me peace, you know, and we need that this time of year. Can I get an amen? All right, so the Christmas star is part of the Christmas story, and God uses the Christmas star to draw people who were not his followers from a far-off land called wise men. Y'all heard of wise men? Sometimes referred to as magi. He used the Christmas star to draw them to Jesus, to point them to Jesus. And I want to look at that story today and talk about what it can say to us in our world a couple thousand years later. And I'm going to dig into this story from Matthew's gospel. And I want you to I just pray that you would be open to hearing what God would have you hear today. I will tell you, for me personally, this thing really hit me this week. It's interesting. If you open yourself up to Scripture and the stories and you open, even if you've heard it before, some of you go, oh, the wise men, I know that story, right? Open yourself up to what this story can say to you. It hit me in a big way this week. Here's how the story starts. Let's dig right into it. Matthew chapter 2. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. I highlighted the two names in that Scripture verse. It says Jesus and King Herod. I think that the gospel writers are always intentional to tell us details. I don't think they put them in there just because they want us to know something. And so what Matthew is trying to tell us in his gospel is that this baby, Jesus, born to this Virgin Mary, we looked at that story last week, he was born in Bethlehem, as we know, if we know that story, and it was during the reign of a king whose name was Herod. Who was King Herod? Herod was a Jewish king. Herod was actually Roman, but he was raised Jewish. And if you know anything about history during this time, Israel was a part of the Roman Empire. They didn't want to be, but they were. Rome had expanded all over that area and captured cities, and not just cities, but they captured whole countries. And so they occupied countries. And what they would do is they would find leaders who were loyal to the emperor, but could also understand the people in that land. So Herod was perfect because he was raised Jewish, but he was Roman. And so he was what you would call a puppet king. What I mean by that is he didn't control himself, really. He was controlled by Rome, okay? Because Rome wanted to be sure that Israel didn't get out of hand. And so they knew that having somebody there like Herod was going to help them. All right, so it starts out telling us that, and you're like, I don't know why it tells us that. It talks about this little baby Jesus, and it talks about the king of that area named Herod. Story goes on. About that time, and we introduced to the wise men, some wise men from eastern lands. So they were not Israelites. They were not Jewish. They were from far away. Some people think really far away because some of them believe, most commentators believe, but that by the time they got to Jesus, Jesus was already a toddler, like walking and stuff. I mean, we often think, and I know your nativities, that bothers you because some of you move the wise men in real quick, like 12 days later. But actually, it was probably a year or two later because they had to travel a long way. We didn't have airplanes and stuff back then. They walked or rode camels or horses. I mean, that's how they got there. All right, so it says that they came from eastern lands, arrived in Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel. That's where you'd go if you want to find something out. And they asked, quote, where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his what? Star. There's that star image. That's where it comes from. and we have come to worship him. Very interesting. The wise men were actually astrologers. It's one of the things they studied was the stars, and they found meaning in the stars. So they weren't just astronomers who understand stars. They actually believed that the stars could tell you something, all right? So they were invited to see Jesus by God, who used the star to draw them all the way to Jerusalem, all right? We've come here to worship him. Who are they talking to? Well, King Herod and his court. So I want you to imagine the scene. These wise men from eastern lands come in, and what they say to the king of that area, the puppet king, is, where do we find the king? Wow. Herod has a chance to react to this. Look at what it says. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this. You can imagine why, right? As was everyone in Jerusalem. So Matthew, the gospel writer, tells us that the star guides these eastern men to Jerusalem. They stop in Jerusalem and they ask the king, where is the king? He's like, hello, right? So he's deeply disturbed by this. And so is everyone else who's in Jerusalem. I find this interesting. You know why? They were completely unaware about Jesus. Remember, he wasn't born a week ago. It was probably a couple years. Bethlehem was right outside of Jerusalem. It's pretty close. If you look on a map, it's not that far away. So within reach of Jerusalem is Bethlehem, and Jesus, who we believe as Christians, if you're a Christian, is God in the flesh, resides right next door. Nobody knew. And when they found out, they probably went outside. I imagine we saw the star. What star? Oh, the star. Herod is so confused by this, deeply disturbed. He actually is going to go. I'm not going to read this part of the story. You can read it. But he's going to go and consult his religious leaders. And he's going to be like, what is this about? And they're like, there's prophecy in the Old Testament about Jesus, the Messiah. They didn't believe it was Jesus, but the Messiah coming, being born, and there'll be a star, and it would guide us all there. Nobody knew. So they walk out and they see the star. I find it interesting that God put the star there for everyone to see, but not everyone saw the star God put there. Think about that for a minute. God put a sign for people to see, but not everybody saw the sign that God put. Only the wise men who were looking for the sign of this Messiah who would come. You might be like, why would these Eastern people come? Well, they wanted to pay respect to a foreign king. And so they were very open to Jesus and who he was. In fact, we'll find out very, very open to him as they come before him in just a little bit. But before we get there, just remember, they were unaware, and it says they were deeply disturbed. I was like, what is deeply disturbed? So I look up the word disturbed in the Greek, the original language, and it literally means this: to stir up or to agitate on the inside, like emotionally, so that it ends up showing on the outside. So what that means is Herod looked ticked and disturbed, and everybody could tell he's not happy. I would not bring him a lunch right now if it's cold, or something like that, because he's really upset. I was thinking, how many of us are like disturbed? How many of us are kind of stirred up on the inside right now? Christmas can do that to you. Can I get an amen? Just like, come on, God, like it's Christmas. Why am I so disturbed right now? Why am I so stirred up? Why am I so emotionally messed up with what's going on? It shows on the outside. This word, disturb, means what is on the inside ends up coming out, and people can see it. I'm that way. Yesterday when the water main broke, I was like, hey, everything's great. Church face. People are like, you ain't all right. And I'm like, no, I don't want to disappoint the kids, man. It was tough. Few people told me, like, when I put that little video out, I don't know how I got volunteered for that, but, it's like, no, I said, I'll do it. I just looked disturbed. You looked like we didn't know what was going on. It's like, yeah, because I was just told 2 minutes earlier we're not going to have it fixed. Worked all night, but it's not ready yet. I was like, So that's very often who we are and how we are. So if you have any kind of like emotional something going on right now or whatever, I want you to think about it, because this story can speak to us. And it could be in your marriage, in your family, and personally. It could be anxiety or depression issues, or just so many things that come at us. It could be a health thing that's happened to you that's you're struggling with. There could just be so many things that we're struggling with today. And that was Herod. He was so messed up by this. Now, for him, it was tied to the fact that some foreigners come looking for a king, and they don't see him as the one that they're supposed to be looking for. I want to give you an image for this message today. I think Herod had a close-handed approach to life, meaning, I'm going to control things, and this is out of control. So I'm going to have to take care of business. I'm going to have to manipulate the situation. Herod's actually going to say, this is what he's going to do. You guys go find him. And when you do, come back and report to me where he is, because I want to go worship him too. What do y'all think? You think that's true? It's not true. In fact, you should know this about Herod. He's so deeply disturbed, Herod is going to put out an edict that all children 2 years old and under, male, in Bethlehem, be killed. It's not enough for Herod to go, I hope I get Jesus. He's like, I'll just take out every Jewish child 2 and under in Bethlehem. Can you imagine what that city was like when he did that? I mean, talk about close-handed, control. I'm not going to surrender to somebody else. I'm not going to surrender. And you go, well, man, I'm not doing that. Thank goodness I haven't done that. Yeah, but we do that. You don't live with closed hands to God? I do. There are many times that my hands are closed, my fists are closed. So I want you to think about that as we go on. He had a completely closed-handed relationship with God. And remember, he was a Jewish king. He didn't even understand the prophecies and things like that. So he has a series of secret meetings with I already told you, with his religious counselors and stuff like this. What's going on? Tell me about the prophecy. They tell him about the prophecy. They all go out and look at the star. Oh, gosh, we didn't see that, because they weren't looking for it. God put it there for everyone to see, but only a few saw it. And the wise men come, and they come looking for the king. It disturbs Herod. He doesn't understand. It disturbs all of Jerusalem. They're like, what is going on? We didn't even notice this. And Herod says, all right, y'all go find him, and I'm going to come worship him too. I, the king of this area, will bow the knee to this little toddler. Who's going to bow to a 2-year-old, right? But Herod says he'll do it. It's a lie. He's not going to do it. Later on, he's going to put out an edict that all children 2 and under in that area, males, be killed. The wise men are told by God not to go back to Herod, so they're aware and listening to God. Don't go back and tell him once you find Jesus. Go worship him and then go your way. So in the story, we hear about that, and it says this, and the star, which we've already been introduced to, they had seen in the east, guided them to Bethlehem. So now they go from Jerusalem, short distance, to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, is just mentioned over and over. When they saw the star, because remember, they were looking for the star. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. And then it says this, they entered the house, check this out, and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. What Herod said he would do, which was a lie, the wise men actually did. It's the whole reason they went. And then it says, finally, then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They brought some really expensive things with them, and they had treasure chests that they carried. They opened up their treasure chest, and they gave to this toddler, and his mother and father, Joseph. They gave him these gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I just think it's interesting that there are two reactions, right, in the story to the star and this birth of Jesus. Now, follow me here. This is just amazing. Two completely different reactions. And one is kind of a closed fist, control, no surrender. I'm going to not let go of anything. I've got a hold of this. God, like you just messed things up. It's about me. It's about me. It's about me, right? That's one reaction. That's Herod and all the folks really in Jerusalem, it says. Then you've got this other reaction, right? And this other reaction are the wise men. Their reaction is openness. So on the one hand, you've got just think of those two images. Closed fist, closed hand. On the other hand, openness. So open, it says, that they get to where Jesus is, and because of that openness, they experience, did you see it? Joy. I wonder if anybody needs a little joy in their lives this season, but I don't just mean now. Like you'd like to carry it into January and February and even March next year. Can I get an amen? How about April and May? And how about for the rest of your life? I'd like a little bit of joy. The word joy actually, because people are so confused by joy. I've preached on this before. The word joy is not happiness. Happiness is an emotion and a feeling. And I love happiness too. Does anybody not like feeling happy? We like to be happy. But joy literally means, you ready for this? Grace recognized. That's what it means. So you see God's grace and you recognize it. You're aware. So it says this, that when the wise men get to where Jesus is, their openness gives them the ability to have joy. They recognize God's amazing grace that's been poured out for them. And I mean, this is crazy to me. These are foreigners that just following the star to get to Jesus. And when they get there, they experience, it doesn't say happiness, it says joy. The word is charis in the Greek. And it means joy. It means grace. Recognize. You're aware of it. And so part of it's probably like, we're finally here. They've been traveling a long time. And then they see the baby Jesus. And they're just blown away by that in such a way that being in the presence of Jesus gives them just this joy. And it actually says it's just seeing the star over the home. By the way, they weren't in a barn or a cave anymore. It says they entered the house, so they had a place. And then they worshiped him. Y'all, the word worship, we call this a worship service, right? The word worship has many implications, and there's many words for worship in the Old and New Testament in Hebrew and Greek languages. Hebrew, Old Testament, Greek, New Testament. There's I think a dozen or so words for worship. This word worship, it means they went in and they laid before him, vulnerable. And they open their hands. So they're laying there. So you got Herod on the one hand. No, I'm not even going. Tell me where he is because I'd like to go worship him too. No, it's a lie. He's going to kill children. And then you have the wise men who, when they get there, there's such a vulnerable transparency to them that they lay on the ground before him. And their hands are open. You've probably seen stuff like that in movies or whatever when somebody comes into a king's courtroom and they pay that kind of respect. They understand that they're in the presence of something greater than themselves. So they lay there and they worship, they surrender. And then it says they open up their treasure chests. And I love that because what it's saying is basically they give this baby the best that they have. And it's not just this. I could easily turn this into a giving sermon. I won't. Don't worry, I won't. All right, but that's part of it. It's part of it, y'all. Part of it is I'm willing to give God my very best. When you understand who he is and the grace that he's given you in your life, when you surrender and you open yourself to him, there's an understanding that I can just give him the best that I have of my finances, of my time, of myself. I give him my very, very best. And so they open up their treasure chests and they give themselves to Jesus. I love the Little Drummer Boy song. It's a Christmas song. And I don't know if you know the story of it, but basically the story is the little drummer boy, doesn't have anything to give, so he gives Jesus, the baby, himself and his song on the drum, because it's the very best that he has to give, and so he gives that. Like, it just, what is the very best of you that Jesus deserves? That's what this is about. So all of that is good. So two very different reactions. Y'all seeing that? The closed fist on one hand and the open-handedness on the other. Herod and the wise men. Okay. Here's what hit me. And it took till this morning, actually. Because I was thinking about it. I want to get back to the star for a moment. You know, I was thinking about the star and what it means. And I was like, it's so interesting, this star that God puts there. And I began to, just the word star, I just kind of meditating on it. Have you ever done that? Just kind of sit there and think for a few moments, have some silence, take a sip of coffee, a little more silence. And all of a sudden it hit me, this thing about stars. In our day and time, when I say star, you're not going to think of that. You are right now, because I talked about it, I put it in the story, but when's the last time you really went out and looked at the stars? Maybe there's going to be a small percentage of people go, I look at the stars every night. I love to gaze at the stars. No, you don't. When do we do that? Most of us can't even do it because there's so much light around where we live, you can't even see the actual stars in the sky. This story is about that star on the sky, but there's more to it. I started thinking about our lives and about stars. What are stars for us? It's really not a what, it's a who. Stars are people in our lives. Follow me. Stars are people. They're important people. Most of us aren't stars. Most of us don't even know a star. We like to act like we do. You know, recently we were talking about a basketball star, and there's possibly a way we could meet this person. And we're like, if we hook up with this person and they talk to this person, you ever want to meet that basketball star? And most of you wouldn't care because you don't like the basketball team I do or whatever. But, you know, can you imagine getting to meet a star or somebody? Or maybe it's like a YouTube star for you. That's for younger generations. Very often it's something like that, a social media star, a blog person that you just really revere. I don't know. Stars are important people. They're put on display for people to see, just like the star in the sky was. So are people. Think about this. Stars are people in our world who get the glory. Stars, I'm going to say this, are people we often worship. I don't worship people. Yeah, we can. We can put people on pedestals and give them the glory and give them all that kind of stuff. So I have a question for you. As you think about this story, it hit me big time today. As I was tying up some loose ends on this message, here's the question. You ready? Who is the star of my life story? Herod was the star of his life story. That's why Herod lived like this: unwillingness to bend the knee, unwillingness to surrender anything to God, manipulating situations, trying to stay in control. If we live like that, then we're the star of our own life story. And I really believe this is so important to hear. Most of us live like we're the star of our story. Herod lived like that. But for the wise men, they were willing to put someone else on display. They wanted to worship Jesus. They wanted to surrender to Jesus. And so they did. They lived with an open-handedness to Jesus, and they were willing for him to be the star. I really believe that you only have two choices. You're either going to be the star of your own life story. It's all about me. Everybody look at me. I'm guiding myself to me, everybody to me. The only reason we want the star above us is so people see me. Look at me, look at me. Social media has become that for many of us. I dare say some of our posts are really about, look at me. If we're honest. Some of our motives, even if we say it's not about us, are about me. And a lot of times it's born out of brokenness. It is. I just want some attention. I got to control everything. Will somebody look at me? If you will this is faith. This is the great exchange. If you will move from this to, God, this is so hard, but I'm going to have to, you want me to open my hands to you like the wise men. See, they were willing to make Jesus the star. And when they opened their hand, what did they receive? In the story, it says joy. A freedom to lay down. I don't want anybody to see me acting funny or like giving my life to Jesus. Christians are weird. Yeah, they are. Because they aren't on display. They're not the star of their own story. We're not supposed to be the star. Pastors aren't supposed to be stars. Christians aren't supposed to be stars. We're supposed to point to the star, Jesus. He's the one on display. He's the one we worship. He's the one. This is how you know you're putting Jesus as the star in your life story. You're beginning to have joy. And it's almost like, how is this? I don't understand this because things aren't good. Well, that's happy. You're beginning to have joy where you're like, even though I recognize God's grace, you're beginning to open up in such a way that you're like, I don't understand it, but it's like there's some kind of, I'm letting go and it just feels, I'm feeling something coming to me as I do that. It's spiritual. It is spiritual. It blows my mind how often we try to explain Christianity without explaining it in a spiritual manner. It's an exchange of where you stop trusting yourself and you start trusting God. I don't have to earn you, God. You earned me on the cross. You came here for me. You want to wow. I come to you in all my sin and brokenness. I'm so dirty, and you want me to come surrender. You want me to be that. You love me enough that I can be in. Yes. And he exchanges all that for freedom of life. And this is how you know it's happening to you. And you really begin to know it's happening to you when you're like, I don't even care about stuff. I'm willing to give away things. I'm willing to give up time. I'm not going to guard my time like nobody met. This is my time. I'm willing to serve God with my life, my everything. So let me land this plane for us, all right, this message. So I was thinking about it just this morning, and I realized God is always within reach. That's part of the Christmas story. He is within reach. For Herod, he was right next door. He was right there. For the foreigners from a far east land, he was within reach. They got to him. Did you see that? God guided them from the far place they were to him. But listen, the star was available for Herod as well. All he had to do was look out and see it. If you want Jesus, here it is. You ready? He's a great gift. He's been given to you by God. But he's within reach, but you can't get him like this. Give me that gift. Yeah, hold on. I'm going to hold on to my life. Thank you for the gift of Jesus. No. How do you receive a gift? None of you are going to receive gifts like that on Christmas morning. You know what you're going to do? More? Are there more gifts? Right? When you're a kid, and are there any more? I saw one over. Oh, that's not mine. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. How do you receive a gift? Nobody who's ever received a gift goes, thank you for the gift. And no. What do? You open your hands. Thank you. And if you've been struggling with Jesus, it's very likely, listen to me, because you know the gift's been given, but you just like, To receive, you have to let go of what's in your hands. This is the wonder of Christmas. So, do you want to receive the gift of Jesus? Open your hands. That's what it's about.